9 months and 4 days from, I think, one of the most consequential elections, not only of your and my lifetimes, but frankly in the history of this country. We're presiding over a failed presidency that is not only doing tremendous harm to our country, but frankly to the entire world. Presided over by an individual who was not that sharp, frankly, on his best day. As somebody who has known him for decades. He promised us unity, and he's given us nothing but division. He promised us peace, and we now have war on 2 continents, including a ground war on the Eurasian continent for the first time in 80 years. He promised us that America would be respected and strong again. And instead he gave us an America that was humiliated and embarrassed and traumatized by the most humiliating withdrawal of U.S. forces since the fall of Saigon in 1975. He promised us prosperity, and instead he gave us the worst inflation in 40 years, the highest gas prices in U.S. economic history, the highest mortgage interest rates in 24 years, and the worst housing market in 24 years, and a spending orgy that is not yet finished. He promised us a return to normalcy, and instead he's given us the most radical social agenda that we've seen kind of out of Washington in our lifetimes, more radical than under Obama, by far. And he's undermined and abused and politicized, and in many ways, frankly, destroyed the rule of law in this country, trying to jail and destroy through legal processes his leading political opponent. Now, this is what we face, and I don't know how you feel, but I feel we have to win this election. We have to. I think that are not soluble between now and November. He's carrying around 3 albatrosses that I don't think can be fixed. The first is voter concerns about his age. You have virtually 3/4 of the American people who think he's too old to be president, including, by the way, 69% of voters. 69% who say that he doesn't have the mental acuity to do the job. It's hard for me to believe that he's going to be showing the American people anything in the next 9 months that's going to disabuse them of those views. But those numbers really understate the extent of this problem. Because among independents, the number who say he's too old to be president is 82%. And among younger voters under the age of 35, it's 80%.
Wow.
So among the voters that he needs the most, they have the deepest conviction that he's not up for the job. So that's problem number 1. And I don't think that can be fixed. And by the way, I know you hear from your friends just like I do at dinner conversations or a cocktail party or whatever, or maybe you'll run into somebody at church and they'll go, I'm so worried that they're going to replace him with Michelle Obama.
Yeah. Yep.
Anybody else heard this?
Oh, yeah.
Well, can I tell you something? And I'm not a prophet, I'm not in the prediction business, but I know Joe Biden and I know Jill Biden. And let me just tell you something. This guy has been running for this job since he was 29 years old, okay? And he was passed over and humiliated by Obama. Passed over for a woman that Obama could not stand and knew was a crook. Now, do you have any idea what that's like? To be humiliated in that way. And then when he decides to run again, the Obama people leak that Obama told him in a private conversation, Joe, you really don't need to do this. and then he got more votes than Obama did. And let me tell you something. If he has to do a weekend with Bernie, and they gotta prop him up, he's not going anywhere.
Right.
Okay? He's worked his entire life to get Camp David, Air Force One, and the desk in the Oval Office, and he will go nowhere, in my opinion. I don't see him voluntarily stepping aside. Now, it's possible you could have an unignorable health episode, and that might change everything. So I think that's problem one. Problem two is the economy. You remember how they were trying to brand this thing as Bidenomics? They're not mentioning that anymore. No Republican candidate should give a speech for the next 9 months without mentioning Bidenomics. We should use the phrase. We should brand his policies as Bidenomics.
Right.
And Bidenomics is out of control federal spending, it's high gas prices, it's high inflation, and even though core inflation has come down, the reason why consumers are still feeling it is because the rate of inflation may be going down, but prices haven't gone down. When you go to the store, the price of a gallon of milk is still $5. A pack of blueberries is still $6 to $8. Prices have not come down. Rents are still on average 21% higher than they were when he became president. The price of a home in America was $250,000 on the day he was inaugurated. Today it's $388,000. That's the median price of a home in the United States. Those prices are not coming down, and the price of financing it has doubled. So that's not going to get any better. And the third problem he's got is the worst humanitarian and national security crisis at our border in American history. And, you know, while I know there's a diversity of views on this, and there are people of goodwill with good intentions who don't necessarily agree, I don't think Republicans in Congress should bail him out of the border mess that he has created. And by the way, so I don't see either one of those wars being resolved before the election. So I think those three, the age and mental acuity issue, Bidenomics, and a national security crisis both at the border and overseas, I don't see any of that getting fixed. Those have contributed to a crisis of epic proportions for the other party among the three key voter groups that are essential and indispensable if he's going to be reelected. And the first is the Hispanic community. The Hispanic community, you remember Ronald Reagan said, Hispanics are Republicans, they just don't know it yet. And we've been working on this for a long time. And some of you may not know this, but I actually grew up in Miami. I went to school as I was growing up with the children of the Cuban immigrants, the ones who were forced to flee Cuba after Castro. And after them came the Salvadorans and the Nicaraguans and the Venezuelans and the Colombians. Those were my friends. And frankly, growing up, I came to know and understand, because they were my friends, this didn't have anything to do with politics. What the rest of the country is only just now discovering, which is they are better Americans than a lot of Anglos are. And the reason why is because they know that what a lot of spoiled, rotten Anglo kids don't know, which is freedom is not for free. It's very fragile, and you can lose it. And I don't know what you all think. You're dealing with it in your individual states. I see our Puerto Rican RNC delegation here. My dear friend Zori, and where is Luis Fortunio? Is he here tonight? Is Luis here? But in any event, I was just in Puerto Rico helping to launch our chapter down there, and I think that they are at the very inflection point. They're about to fall. If you look at the polling right now, this is the New York Times Siena College poll from December. The Hispanic vote among registered voters, if the election were held today, would be 42% Biden and 41% Trump. In the USA Today Suffolk University poll from, I guess, 2 weeks ago, it's 39% Trump and 34% Biden. Now that compares to 65 to 32% in 2020. So we're talking about a 20-point swing. And if that number happens, and again, I'm not saying the election will turn out the way it is today. We're a long way from November. I mean, think about it. Right now, sitting here today, we're still 45 days away from where we were in 2020 when states started to shut down during the COVID pandemic. So there's a lot of stuff that could happen. But if that were to happen, if we were to split the Hispanic vote, and if Donald Trump were to win 40% plus of the Hispanic vote, Arizona is done. Texas won't be a battleground. Florida won't be a battleground. Georgia will go. Wisconsin will go. They cannot win the election if we win 40% or more of the Hispanic vote. So let's go out there and fight for it and get it. Take advantage of this opportunity. What does the plan look like if I'm right about the macro political environment and the things that he can't fix, and if all the blinking red lights of these core constituencies right for the picking are right there for us, then what do we have to do to take full advantage of this opportunity? I think there are three things that are absolutely imperative and critical. Number one, we have to match or exceed them with our ground game in every key battleground state and in every battleground congressional district. I am sick and tired of getting outspent 3 or 4 to 1 on television. That's one thing. But I'm even more tired of getting outspent 5, 6, 7 to 1 on the ground. Let's raise the money through the victory programs, through the joint fundraising accounts, and let's have outside organizations like ours, which cannot coordinate, but we're able to target the faith community and the faith-based voters. We can talk to them very effectively. Let's knock on every door. Every mid and low propensity voter shouldn't get 1 door knock. They shouldn't get 2 door knocks. We should bank the vote as the RNC is trying to do among core Republican votes, and then let's knock on the doors of those mid and low propensities voters 3, 4, 5 times if we have to. Let's text them, let's phone them, and I don't just mean paid phone banks, and I don't just mean paid text messages. I want volunteer phone banks. I want these people to be getting so many calls from volunteers and paid staff that they finally just say, no mas, I'm voting today. I'll go down and vote. I can remember calling a woman. I was at a phone bank in Palm Beach County when I was working for George W. Bush in 2004. This was back in the old days, so you didn't have an app or anything like that. I was sitting there with a call sheet on an Excel file, and I had the old phone that you dial on. I didn't even have a cell phone. And I called this woman, and she said, "You are literally the 12th person who has called me." She said, "I'm voting today. I will vote today if you will just promise me that no one will call me again." And I said, "Ma'am, if you vote, you're going to show up in the overnight reports as having voted. You'll drop out of the turnout universe. We'll never call you again. I promise." And I'll tell you what I did. I hung up the phone and I turned to the volunteer next to me and I said, "I think we're going to win." Now, everything that we do in terms of data analytics, all the advances in data science, all the technological progress of the last 50 years, none of it matters if it doesn't lead to the kind of thing that I'm describing. It's somebody in their neighborhood going door to door, somebody in their workplace, somebody calling their friends, somebody in their church. So that's number one. Number two, I think we need to have the most robust, serious, and well-funded coalition effort aimed at the three voter groups that I talked about: Hispanics, African Americans, and young voters that we have had in the history of our party. And I don't think it can be something that we're just doing at the end for show and tell. I think it has to be fully integrated into the field effort, by which I mean when we're knocking on doors, when we're making calls, let's make sure that we're calling modeled, either swing or conservative, not necessarily Republican, but conservative, modeled, or swing Hispanics, African Americans, and young people. And Ron and I were talking about this over the meal. This is real important for those of you who are state party chairmen. It isn't enough to expect the RNC to do our job for us. If we're a state party leader, we don't want to outsource this to a coalition director. Okay, the state party chairman needs to go to the Hispanic community events. The state party chairman needs to go to the Black church and meet with some African American pastors. Because when we go, when we show up, you see, it's a statement that you matter. And yes, my coalition director is with me, and they're helping to run the day-to-day. But this is a top priority for me. That's why I went to Puerto Rico. That's why I was in Detroit in December meeting with Black pastors, because when I go, it says this is a top priority of the entire organization. And if we do that, I can promise you it will result in historic voter turnout and historic Republican vote totals among these core constituencies. My organization, Faith and Freedom Coalition, is currently registering Hispanics to vote that are pro-life and pro-family in about 500 Hispanic churches in Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. That's happening every Sunday. It's not going to happen in September and October. It's happening now in January and February. Our volunteers knocked on 100,000 Hispanic doors just in Miami-Dade in 2022. So we've got to make this voter contact. Our goal of what we're doing, and I don't know what the metric would be for the party, you guys will have to figure that out for yourselves. But we're knocking on 10 million doors in 21 states. We'll have 10,000 volunteers, paid staff. You know, it's a mix of paid and volunteers. Our goal is for 20% or 2 million of those doors to be in minority neighborhoods. You see, if we don't ask for the vote, we're not going to get the vote. We got to ask for the vote. But you've heard it and I've heard it, where they say there's no ROI there. You know, we've only got limited resources. We got to turn out our vote. But I respond to that with an anecdote from the 2008 Obama campaign. I had a friend of mine who I know is not only a Republican primary voter, he's a Republican donor. So he was in the voter file as somebody who was voting in Republican primaries. He was not their voter. They were never going to get him. He called me, not the first time an Obama volunteer knocked on his door. He called me the second time. And he called me up and said, "Ralph, I got a bad feeling about this one." I said, "Why is that?" I said, "My door has been knocked on by 2 Obama volunteers in the last 45 days. And he said, "And no Republican volunteer has knocked on my door." I said, "Now why are they knocking on my door?" And I said, "I'll tell you why." I said, "They have so many people deployed, they have so much money putting so much metal on the target that they've hit every one of their voters multiple times. So now they're moving on." You see, that's the way we gotta think. And then the third thing that I think we have to do is we have to have an optimistic, inclusive, and and forward-looking message and agenda for the voters. It is not enough for us to just say, he's a failure, he's a disaster, he's not up for the job, vote for us. That's not going to be enough.
No.
We've got to offer a positive agenda.
Right.
And I do want to address briefly, I know it's already been discussed through the weekend, but I do want to talk briefly about the abortion issue. Because I don't know if you've noticed or not, but we've been on our back heels on this issue from the day Dobbs came down on June 24th of 2022. And they think that this is their secret weapon in 24, just like they think it's what caused them to do better than many thought they would do in 2022. I'm frankly skeptical of that, because if you look at the polling, and I was texting with John McLaughlin, who's one of former President Trump's pollsters, and he shared with me some of his data. And again, this could change, but if you look at the data today, about 70% of voters are citing either the economy or the border as the number one issue driving their voting decision. This is just from an Associated Press poll from January 22nd. 35% said immigration was their number one issue and concern. 32% said inflation and the economy. 16% said crime. 12% said healthcare. Only 7% said abortion. Now that doesn't mean that their abortion message won't work if they can target it at college-educated suburban women, which is what they will do. But it will only work if we don't answer it. And it will only work if we remain on defense and don't get on offense. And I mean beginning yesterday. You see, on this issue, as with all other issues, in politics, if you're not on offense, you're on defense. And if you're explaining, you're losing. And we're spending all of our time explaining, no, I didn't mean that when I talked about rape and incest. No, I didn't mean that when I said I'd support a federal bill. See, if you're explaining, you're losing. What I want our candidates doing is all I want them, not all, but 90% of what they do should be attacking the other candidate for their extremism. They're the extremists on abortion, not Republicans and conservatives. And we need to quit having a look in our eyes and start calling them on it. Joe Biden, who is a faithful Roman Catholic who frequently attends Mass, is with a straight face going to run for re-election, advocating abortion on demand, including as a form of birth control, up to the moment of birth, paid for with tax dollars, as an entitlement under a Medicaid program. For the first time in American history, he wants to use public funds to pay for abortion. Now that's his position. And he supports a federal law that will do all of the things that I just described. Now, if you go out and do a poll and you accurately describe his position, do you know how many voters say they're in favor of it? 11%. So why are we on defense when they should be on defense? So that's what I think we need to do. The other thing that candidates have got to do, and I don't know why we've forgotten to do this, it's what we were always telling candidates pre-Dobbs, it probably applies doubly or triply now, is when our candidates are talking about the life issue, they have to personalize it and make it about their own life experience.
Yeah.
So for example, I was born 6 weeks premature. And as I said, that was 92 years ago. So, not a lot of 6 weeks preemies survived then. So I spent the first 6 weeks of my life fighting to live in an incubator. So when I say that, and I share my own experience, you have to understand this is personal for me. This is not political. I believe in protecting every innocent human life because my life once hung in the balance. Maybe it's a candidate
with a spouse who had a difficult pregnancy. Maybe it's somebody who lost a child. Maybe it's somebody who has a special needs child. You remember Sarah Palin and how eloquently she spoke at the convention in Minneapolis? It's disarming. And it's kind of like sharing one's faith. You know, I can tell you what my theology is, and you may agree or disagree. But if I share my testimony, you see, that's personal. You can't really argue with that. So that's my thoughts on how we ought to handle that. I want to thank you for the privilege and the honor of being a part of this party my entire life, of being a co-laborer and a fellow worker at the grassroots with so many in this room. You're unsung heroes. You don't always get the credit. But as we go into the last remaining 9 months and 4 days, I want us to remember that we're not just trying to win an election. We are privileged to be a part of the party that, unique among all political parties in the history of Western civilization, was founded to right a wrong and to redress an evil. And it was the holding of other human beings made in God's image in chattel bondage. It was because of this party and the leader that it elevated in Abraham Lincoln that slavery came to an end. It was because of this party that those who were freed from those hundreds of years of bondage gained the right to vote, gained the right to public accommodation, gained the right to equal protection under the law. It was this party that in the industrial and post-industrial era put forward the free market ideas that created the greatest economy the world has ever seen, and has caused people to brave oceans and crawl across broken glass at the risk of their own lives, because we built something here that others around the world can only dream of. It was this party with moral clarity that will echo down through the centuries during the Cold War said that communism wasn't just a national security threat. It was evil. It was immoral.
Amen.
It deserved to be left on the ash heap of history. And it was this party that elevated Ronald Reagan, who won that war without firing a shot. You see, this is the legacy that we defend. This is a great party. And there are people who denigrate and say there's not a dime's worth of difference. Don't you believe it? It's not true. We have a cherished and an honored legacy to uphold. And there are people who surround us like a great cloud of witnesses that are urging us on to finish the work that they began. We not only need to win this election, we need to secure that legacy. Thank you all very much.